Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our DeKalb Chamber State of Education and Workforce Development. I hope you all have had a great morning. It has been a fantastic and full morning thus far, and we are here now at our closing session. If you are just joining and hadn't had a chance to join us for the morning session, I'm Elaine Armstrong. I serve as Vice President of Marketing for Goodwill of North Georgia. But today I am serving in the capacity as a board member for the DeKalb Chamber, as well as the chair of the Education and Workforce Development Committee of the Chamber. We had a great morning learning about what our workforce development and educational partners are doing and how they've responded to the pandemic and sort of what their current state is for those all across the county. And I hope for those of you who were able to join us found them very informative. Then we went into some of our breakout sessions and we heard many different voices for folks who were on the front lines, like parents and students and educators. But today, and on our closing session, I am honored to introduce our next speaker, who is Mr. Matt Jones. He is the Chief of Staff of the Georgia Department of Education. And Mr. Jones has served in his current role for over 5 years and oversees the day-to-day operations of the agency. He's responsible for carrying out the vision of Superintendent Woods and works with advocacy groups, school leaders, policymakers, all to promote policies and programs that support our state's students and teachers. He's also a former educator himself, so a former high school teacher who taught civics and American government, geography, English language arts, and engineering technology, spanning grades from 9th through 12th over the course of his teaching career. And get this, he was also named District Teacher of the Year in Toombs County. We are so elated and grateful to have Mr. Matt Jones with us today. Matt, I am going to turn it over to you. Welcome, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Elaine, and just really appreciate the DeKalb Chamber putting this event on and just really providing this opportunity for the community to engage with really the pressing issue right now, which is COVID-19, which we've been dealing with for a while. But I am Matt Jones. I'm the Chief of Staff here at the Georgia Department of Education. On behalf of State School Superintendent Richard Woods, I just want to thank you for attending today's events and actively engaging really in our common commitment to support the DeKalb County community. And I just want you to think, next month marks 1 year since COVID cases started popping up in our public schools, and really think back to that moment. An educational system that usually is seen as pretty traditional had to transform structures overnight. How we delivered millions of meals and millions of lessons. We were called not only to become public health experts, but also remain public education experts. We were living through a once-in-a-lifetime event with a virus we knew little about. And in the midst of all this, we had to make a lot of high-stakes decisions and really no-win scenarios. Students in schools and possibly at risk at being exposed to COVID, or at home and possibly at risk to deal with abuse and hunger. Keeping our doors open, and with it the opportunity to be exposed or shutting down our schools and our economy. Our school leaders were called to make these high-stakes decisions. Our teachers had to learn how to teach virtually overnight while also supporting their own children at home. Our parents struggled to motivate and educate their children while figuring out their own work situations. But out of all this, I think grew a new appreciation for our public school system and what they do each and every day. From the onset of the pandemic since March, Superintendent Woods and the DOE, we really responded quickly to extend grace over mandates and compassion over compliance. That's really been our mantra at the DOE, is compassion over compliance. So what does that look like? We suspended testing and accountability last year, and we're looking to do that again this year. We awarded billions of dollars in federal stimulus funds at record speed to districts. We delivered millions of pieces of PPE and supplies, equipped thousands of buses with mobile Wi-Fi hotspots across the state. We doubled the bandwidth to our schools, and we also provided a free formative tool for districts to use to identify learning loss with their students. And we'll continue to fight for as much flexibility and support during these trying times that we possibly can. But the thing to keep in mind is, even though these have been unprecedented events, our education system in Georgia has also showed unprecedented results. We have record high graduation rates. We continue to beat the national average in SAT and ACT. And from a workforce development point of view, we continue to be the #1 state to do business. But we also know, despite the strong academic performance, we know what parents, business owners, or educators, or school leaders are going through each and every day. Rolling quarantines, rising case counts, loss and fear, connectivity issues, and really juggling lots of different instructional models. But during these unprecedented times, we got to rise to this occasion. And so I really just wanted to charge you with a few things today as we're closing out this event. One, just continue to keep the great work that's occurred today, continue to actively engage with the whole community, identify common barriers and work together to develop solutions, communicate and be transparent, and engage with those that's going to be directly impacted by these decisions. I think during a pandemic, people don't demand perfection, but they do demand responsiveness to the realities that they're facing. And it's so easy to point out problems, but it's hard to develop solutions. But I think we can as we continue to work together. The second piece is just remaining to look at gaps. We know since the pandemic, we've seen a lot of gaps with our connectivity issues across the state, with food insecurity, with healthcare. But the reality is these gaps existed before the pandemic, and the pandemic's only magnified those gaps. So we have to keep our eye on that as we turn the corner and we come out of the pandemic. We can't lose sight of those issues and have a long-term plan to address those issues. And finally, even though this has been a crisis that we've all experienced, it's also an opportunity to really reimagine the work that we've been doing. I think everybody wants to go back to normal, to a point where we can shake people's hands and give people's hugs. I know teachers want to see kids in their hallways again, be in their classrooms again, and we all long for that. But there's some things that weren't working before this pandemic that I think we have a real opportunity to reimagine, get in a better place, and move our state forward and DeKalb County community forward. COVID-19 has really been a common experience. It's been something that we've all experienced, we've all shared. And really, during a time of so much division, this can really be an opportunity for us to have a common cause, to rally around a common long-term response around our educational needs and our workforce needs as a state. And I hope we really take advantage of that and continue to work together. And I just, again, want to just appreciate your participation today, lending your voice, but just know this is a start, and we'll continue down this road for the betterment of our students, our future, and the DeKalb County community. Thank you very much, Elaine.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. I think there were a lot of things that you said there, and I love the challenge and challenging us all to work together. This is just the start. And you mentioned we're coming on the 1-year anniversary, which no one probably thought we would be here 1 year later, and still dealing with this. So, if you don't mind, there is one question that I'd love to ask you before, one question from the audience while we wait for Matt to return. How can we use this crisis to continue to get the graduation rates up in our state? And that comes from Brenda Reed, who is from Publix, who is a great sponsor of the DeKalb Chamber and education efforts, and of course, a great sponsor of this event today.
Yeah, so one thing that we know, of course, last March is when COVID started hitting our schools. So the good thing at that point was kids was through most of their academic year. And so it was good at the end of the year when graduation rates came out. We saw an increase, but I think that showed kids were already on a really solid track before the pandemic hit. So I think that's a positive indicator and really points to the resiliency of our kids and our teachers. So I think that's a positive indicator where we've been going as a state. Each year we've seen year-over-year increases in our graduation rate. But one other thing I mentioned is really using this as an opportunity to reimagine education. And we've put together the DOE, a Reimagining K12 Education document. And one of those pieces is looking at our diplomas and providing pathways that are more aligned to what kids want to do post-secondary. So if that's going straight into the workforce, or that's going to one of our technical colleges, or the military or a university system. We really see high school should be more customized around what the post-secondary goals are for our students to prepare them for those expectations afterwards. We've done a lot of work in Georgia to raise rigor, and that's important, but we feel like there's a really good opportunity to have a more relevant academic experience. And we think not only students are going to be more engaged and be on a better path to a diploma, but we think our business and industry partners are going to get more solid employees on their end that's more better prepared for the skills that they're looking for.
Absolutely. Something we know all about at Google of North Georgia with that workforce development. Brenda also commented that she loves the creativity in using the buses as hotspots. If there is a way to continue that, particularly for the business community who is watching, we represent the chamber. If there are ways that the business community can help with that, or how do we continue to grow that? Before you leave, and I know you have to go, give us just some insight onto how we can do that.
So we actually have put together a connectivity map for the entire state to show not only what areas have access to internet, but what those speeds are to see if they are at the level to really do business in today's workforce and educational needs. And I would be happy to share that with the chamber, because I think a lot of people are shocked. A lot of times they think connectivity issues, they think only South Georgia or rural Georgia, and we definitely know there's issues there. But even in a county like DeKalb County, we know there are deserts where there aren't access to connectivity, or maybe even not the speeds that kids need in order to able to thrive. And that's really where I was trying to get to, is we had to make this pivot and switch so quickly that I hope we don't lose sight of really focusing and investing on connectivity in the long run. What we've said in that reimagining document, we really feel like internet is a basic utility on par with having access to water and electricity. And I think if we have that commitment and that goal, we can get to a place in the state where all kids have access to connectivity. That's not only going to be a benefit from the educational system, but also as we're working to attract workforce, employers, and businesses into our community as well.
Fantastic. Matt, we thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for the work that you are doing at our State Department of Education. Please definitely send us that document. We'll definitely share it out with our members, as I think it would definitely be enlightening for us to know where those connectivity gaps are in our own county. We appreciate your work. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, audience, we are going to turn to our last speaker of the day, and that is Mr. Greg Wilson. So Greg is the Workforce Development and Economic Analyst Unit Manager at the University of Georgia's Carl Vinson Institute of Government. Go Dogs. He leads the Institute's Workforce Development and Economic Development Technical Assistance Program. He assists state agencies, local workforce development boards, economic development organizations, and educational institutions with workforce development, economic development, and public engagement projects. He focuses on data analysis, program implementation, meeting facilitation, decision support, and strategic planning. He is a busy guy. He also helps communities and organizations use labor market, census, and education data to make decisions. He's also served as the lead analyst and author of the Governor's High Demand Career Initiative report, which is a very useful tool if you've not actually seen that, which is details high demand occupations and skills in Georgia and across industries. He's also taught workforce development at state, regional, and national conferences. We are so glad to have Mr. Greg Wilson here today. He is going to share with us some trends in education and workforce development. So Matt, I am going to turn it over to you.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Elaine. Hopefully y'all can hear me. Yep, good,
yes.
Good. Well, thank y'all for being here. It's so good to see friends and see all this good work happening here today. I don't know about y'all, but I miss meeting in person. I love presenting, and I love kind of the interactive components that we can get. We'll try to make that happen today with Hopin. So I'm gonna give you all your first task today. Is I want you to go to the chat and 5 words or less. Just give me kind of a key takeaway from what you've heard this morning. We've covered a lot of ground. We've covered a lot of territory. We've covered a lot of topics, and I'm just curious as I'm getting ready to dive into this. what are some of the things that y'all are taking away from this? What did you learn? What was new? What was validated maybe that you've already seen? So go ahead and do that now, and then I'm going to pull up a couple of slides here that we're going to use today. So for those of y'all that know me or have had the opportunity to interact with me, you know that I'm a data nerd. I love data. I love digging into quantitative data, but I also love to gather qualitative data and hear what's happening on the ground. And I think that's really what today's event has given us, is we've heard from various metro leaders, DeKalb leaders, to get a sense of what they're seeing, how the past 11 months has been. And then today I want to kind of follow up on that and give you kind of, from a quantitative side, what do we know that's happening? What do we know that's shaping our activities now? But also, what do we need to be looking at that might be shaping, the future? This is not a comprehensive view of this. I'll go ahead and note that the data nerd in me, we don't have enough data right now, especially at a regional or county level. A lot of our traditional data is lagged. So today I'm trying to bring you kind of the best ways that we can look at this with the data we have available. I've got kind of two key messages today. The first, and you've heard this day in, or all morning, is this pandemic's having large impacts on educational delivery. We've heard from secondary and post-secondary leaders about this, but I want to bring you a couple of numbers that I'm looking at, and that I'm talking to district leaders, institutional leaders about. And the first is that when we look back at on the K-12 side, and we look at our fall enrollment counts, we know that fall 2020 enrollment was down about 40,000 students across Georgia. Georgia, enrollment really is shaped by demographic trends. So when the state was growing a little bit quicker, we were having more births, enrollment was shooting up. It's been slowing a little bit, and that's tied to demographic trends. But no surprise to anybody who follows enrollment. What was that our K-12 enrollment this fall was down. It was really down kind of across the entire state. On here, I brought you the top 5 largest enrollment declines. I'll tell you that's really based on school system size though as well. So when you're looking at this, and Matt, I was in Toombs County before. Toombs County is a much smaller district than say DeKalb County, Cobb, Fulton, Gwinnett, or Clayton. So just keep that in mind. So what's happening with these students? Where are they going? And we'll kind of unpack this a little bit here in a second, but some are being homeschooled. Some are maybe going to a private school. Some are maybe jumping to maybe a virtual school option. They're re-enrolling there. So there's lots of different things happening there. But if we break it down at a grade level for the entire state of Georgia, I think this is what really kind of caught my attention as I was plugging through this, these numbers back when they were released. As we really look at this, is that the enrollment decline is not spread evenly across all grades. So if we look at this, again, statewide data here, we look at a pre-K all the way through 12th grade. We see our largest decline in kindergarten. So in Georgia, kindergarten is not mandatory; it's optional. And so we saw that maybe a lot of parents didn't choose to put their students into kindergarten. Maybe they're going to use some kind of alternative approach, or they're going to help the children at home. But we also see some enrollment declines happening in the early grades. And I know that all of us here know how important those early grades are for literacy, for math, for teaching some of those foundational skills that are really going to help our students succeed as they go further along. So I think as we, as education and community leaders, thinking through what this means, and we've heard bits and pieces of this, and I know that the leaders in DeKalb are already working on this and thinking, what does the next several years look, and what does this mean for the next several years? But kind of want to keep that on your mind. And we're seeing kind of a somewhat similar trend, but different trend in terms of our post-secondary enrollment. Post-secondary, as we've heard again this morning, it's been a tough time in post-secondary education as well. COVID has impacted every facet of our lives, every facet of education. And what we've seen is kind of some challenges with enrollment. So for our university system of Georgia, they had a very small enrollment increase, about 3,500 students, but that's at the system level for the entire state of Georgia. And when you dig into that maybe a little bit further, things look a little different. What you see is that some of our state colleges, which maybe have more of an access mission. We heard about the great work that the Georgia Perimeter campus of Georgia State's doing. We've seen declining enrollment, but we've seen some enrollment growth in maybe our comprehensive universities. A metro example might be Kennesaw State University. And there's been some shifts happening that have maybe been driving some of this. So administering the SAT and ACT became really challenging during the pandemic. So we saw a lot of educational institutions say that you don't need a SAT or ACT score, to get admitted. So students may have gone, to other institutions, but I'm going to be closely watching retention. Are we going to be able to retain these students? And then, our technical college system of Georgia across again statewide saw about a 10% decrease in enrollment, about 5,700 students. And what do we know about this? What's kind of driving this? We've heard some of this today. I had an opportunity to work with the technical college this past fall and did some listening sessions with students. And they talked about some of the challenges that they faced, things like taking care of children that are doing school virtually. We talked about that this morning. They talked about financial barriers, about balancing work and school. And we get that same data, from national estimates as well. Things like changes in financial aid, changes in cost of attendance, being a caregiver are challenges we face on the educational side. So that's kind of what I wanted to add to the conversation here this morning on education. And I want to shift and jump over to a little bit of conversation on what's happening with our workforce and our economy, both from a perspective of what do we do now, but also thinking about, as workforce leaders, what do we need to be doing in the next 6 months or the next 12 months or even the next 24 months? And, I know that we're all hopeful, myself included, that things will get back to more normal here. But we also know that even when we get to this new normal, we're still going to be feeling the impacts of this. So the Georgia Department of Labor pivoted quickly early in the pandemic to bring us some new data that we never had access to at the state and regional and even the county level. So I want to give them kudos for that. Because we have data now on initial claims for unemployment insurance. So if Greg loses his job, hopefully one of the first things that Greg will do will be to file for unemployment, to have that assistance, access to benefits, also maybe access to job search resources. So no surprise to anybody here, our initial claims for unemployment insurance, took off in Metro Atlanta. So this is the 10-county core Metro Atlanta region, by the way. Early April, we saw over 200,000 claims in 1 week for unemployment insurance. Now, as the economy is reopened, we're still seeing folks lose their jobs. We're still seeing 12, 13, 14,000 initial claims for unemployment insurance each week. So, we're not out of this by any stretch of the imagination. The other piece to know is this data is the first time you're filing for unemployment insurance. So Greg may have lost his job back in August. I'm still filing for unemployment insurance, but I wouldn't necessarily be counted in this. So that's important to know. It kind of gives us a sense of we're past the real challenging time, but we're still in the midst of a challenge. If we look back, Metro Atlanta, again, the core 10 counties, we look back and we're still seeing 12,000 or so initial claims each week. It varies a little bit. There's some seasonality to it, and as COVID changes and grows and shrinks and slows, I suspect we'll keep seeing that change. Kind of the other number that I'm regularly looking at, and I think a lot of y'all are as well, is looking at the unemployment rates. But I want to talk about this because I think there's still some things we don't know. So right now in the Metro Atlanta MSA, the unemployment rate is currently, or at least by the book, 5.4%. So this is about 2 percentage points higher than where we were pre-pandemic times. But I would encourage us all to maybe take this with a grain of salt. We heard yesterday the Federal Reserve Chairman Powell. He said the national unemployment rate's about 6 percentage points. But the Federal Reserve really estimates that unemployment's more about 10% across the states, about a 4 percentage point increase. And that's due to some misclassification errors that the Bureau of Labor Statistics has really been struggling with the entire pandemic. So this rate might be higher. We don't have an exact estimate for what Metro Atlanta would be, but it's likely higher than this 5.4%. So, we're doing a lot better than we were back in April in terms of unemployed individuals in Metro Atlanta, but still facing some challenges. But I think a key point, and I heard this all morning long, is an eye towards equity in this, an eye towards equity in this recovery. And one thing that we're finding is that it's not the same story for every Georgian or every person who lives in Metro Atlanta. If you're a data nerd like me, I just want to plug the website tracktherecovery.org. They've got some great national data, great state data, some regional data, some county data. But what they're doing is they're partnering with both the public sector and the private sector to really produce some data sets that we've never had access to. So what this graph here you see is it shows you the percent change in employment for Metro Atlanta. And it's showing you, it's breaking out, the red line is for high wage earners, 60,000 and over. The greenish line in the middle is for middle wage earners. That's kind of your 27 to 60,000 earners. And then that bluish purple line at the bottom is for our low wage earners, the 27,000 or less earners. And let's kind of unpack each one of these lines here just briefly. So the red line are high wage earners. We saw some decline in unemployment, about a 10% decline. But look, that actually recovered really quickly. And we're actually doing better in that than we were, pre-pandemic. Middle wage, we saw kind of more of this this hump shape or upside down hump shape, but we've come back, closer to towards 0%. But what's really I think more challenging for us and for workforce development leaders, this is why we do what we do, is to help and serve our communities. This purple line is our low wage earners. We know that our low wage earners work in industries like hospitality that we've talked about today a little bit, retail. Maybe they're on the front lines of this, and their jobs may not come back, or they can't do their job, from home. So facing lots of challenges there as well. So we'll need to really be thinking through, how can we help? What can we do on this? How do we help reskill, upskill, and get folks back to work? Another number that I'll tell you that I'm keeping a close eye on as well is the civilian labor force. So that's the number of folks that are employed plus individuals that are looking for work. And I'm looking at this because when we saw in the Great Recession, we saw a whole portion of our workforce never come back after the Great Recession. Maybe they were discouraged, maybe their skills hadn't kept up, maybe they were close to retirement and they really maybe weren't ready for retirement or weren't planning on it, but it happened. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen to our labor force. Are we going to have a shrinking labor force? Because remember, pre-pandemic, we couldn't find anybody. Pre-pandemic, we were at 3%. We were at full employment, and we're going to get out of this. We're going to come back stronger. But are we going to have the workforce necessary to make this work? So I'm keeping an eye on this number. I would encourage you to as well. You can get this data at the county level as well. So I mentioned that in some ways we don't have all the data we want. Some data that we are looking at that might be newer for some of us is looking at online job postings data. So there's a number of companies that'll crawl the internet and collect data that are posted on sites like Indeed, LinkedIn, Monster. Maybe the DeKalb Chamber has a job board as well. And it's collecting that data, and it kind of gives us a more real-time data because we're getting this data every month. It's not very lagged, and it kind of gives us a sense of maybe who's hiring right now. So we see pre-pandemic there were maybe 250,000 jobs in the Metro Atlanta MSA. Fell to about 200,000 in April, and we've seen kind of some increases and decreases there. But we're getting closer back to those pre-pandemic times. So that shows that the labor market's functioning, still facing some challenges, of course. What jobs are being posted? Who's looking for what right now? This list actually, if you had gone back and said December 2019, this list would actually look really similar, which is kind of something that's really interesting about online job postings. Almost any community in Georgia, we're going to see truck drivers, we're going to see nurses. In Metro Atlanta, we're going to see software developers, retail, customer service, marketing, kind of just a little bit of everything. And it gives you a sense right there in December of 2020 how many unique job postings there were for each one of those jobs. So that kind of commercial truck driver number probably doesn't surprise any of my friends from our post-secondary institutions. So this has been a really interesting recession. And I say that in a lot of different ways, because it hasn't followed kind of our normal expectations for a recession. All things considered, when we look at tax revenue, the state's done pretty well. There's an announcement last week about January tax collections were strong, up a little bit. When we look at sales tax revenue, typically sales tax revenue, is really kind of tied to the pocketbook. If I have money to spend, I'm going to go out and buy some new clothes, or I'm going to go out and buy a book, or go out to eat. If things are a little tighter, I may curtail that spending. This is our Metro Atlanta 10 county core regions, and this is the educational local options sales tax, that 1% sales tax. And if we look at the collections from 18 to 19 to 20, and note the scale on here, it's not a zero scale. Collections are actually up, which is something that we started collecting this data and publishing it on georgiadata.org back in April, because we wanted to help communities track this, and we've come out stronger. And in a lot of ways, individuals may have more money than they did pre-pandemic, at least for the time being. We still have lots and lots of challenges, but tax collections right now have proven to be strong. Still have some headwinds against us. Still going to have some challenges there. Still more to find out, but one to note that. One last kind of piece of data that comes from the Census Bureau. They do a new survey of small business owners. And they've got a number of questions, but this one, as I was thinking about kind of wrapping up this conversation and trying to, look into the crystal ball a little bit, they asked a question of Metro Atlanta business owners. When do you think things are going to return to normal for your business? And a majority of our business owners said that it's going to be 6 months or more. Some of them said, shorter. Some businesses think that they're never going to get back to the normal level of operations. Some have really seen no or little effect. So I think this shows us that we still have some time to go. We also have businesses right now that are moving forward, or haven't seen maybe the impact that others have, and that makes sense with this pandemic. Some sectors have been hit much harder than others, and some sectors have surged. So as I think about this and kind of what's on my mind for the future, for the next several months and longer, I've got kind of several questions that I want to know. What are the unknown unknowns? What can't we track in the data? What haven't we seen yet? What are going to be the impacts that in the years to come we're going to be talking about that we didn't even know of right now? These are the kind of things that keep me up at night when I can't fall asleep and I toss and turn. It's, what don't we know that we wish we knew so we could work on addressing? What trends of these are going to be temporary? What trends of these are going to stay with us post-pandemic? How do we take care of the bad? And maybe there's some good things that have come out of this. I think we've heard that bits and pieces here today. When do we reach normal again? And that's a question I get a lot. And I don't know what normal is going to look like, in the pandemic and post-pandemic, but it's probably going to be a series of events. And then I'm curious, how is this going to impact our demographics? How is COVID-19, the economic challenges, what does that mean for our demographics? There was a story in the AJC recently about the decline in births. That we're seeing less babies being born. That's not a Georgia trend. It's actually a national trend, actually international trend, really getting into it. It was happening pre-pandemic, but we're even seeing less babies right now being born in the pandemic. A lot of that's tied to economic uncertainty right now. But what does that mean? But that impacts school enrollments in the years to come. That ultimately impacts higher ed enrollment. So things that happen now are going to be with us for a while. So as I wrap up, Elaine, and we turn to questions, if you're looking for more data, I would invite you to visit a website that we maintain called georgiadata.org. On the topics page, we visualize a whole different different sets of relevant county level data. There's also a COVID-19 topic there at the top that has sales tax data and unemployment insurance data that you can dig into, and we're updating that as those data are released. Happy to chat more with y'all. I'll drop my email address into the chat as well. If you're looking for some slides coming out today as well, feel free to drop me an email. Happy to share with you or dialogue more. Do we have time for a question?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for that wealth of data that you provided on your slides. just very enlightening, and some of the things that I hadn't heard yet, which were great. We do have one question in the chat so far, and then if no one else has questions, I have a few that I was taken during your presentation. But so Vanessa Roussel asks, millennials are a growing part of the population. How can companies prepare to connect with millennials to replace existing workers? And are you seeing any of this in the data that you're tracking?
We're not seeing this in the data necessarily, it's kind of an interesting question because, when we talk about millennials, is kind of one homogenous group, but it's really, we've got older millennials and younger millennials that have, had different lived experiences. But I think it's really, I would push back and say it's not even just about millennials, but, what is your company's talent strategy? What is your community's talent strategy? What are we doing to make sure that DeKalb County is a place where millennials and those to come, want to live? Are we, even at a company, are we looking at our policies and procedures? Are we looking at how we recruit? Are we working with Emory and Georgia State and Georgia Piedmont Technical College, to find those students? Are we engaging with career services there? Are we putting in place policies? I think a lot of millennials and a lot of us are going to, be hoping for more remote work, where it makes sense and where applicable to come, even in a post-COVID world. So I think it's kind of, that conversation, and really, it's a conversation too about succession planning. We've got an aging workforce, we've got an aging population in Georgia. What are we doing to build up that next generation? If we know that that someone's we're gonna have a key role that's gonna, possibly retire in a few years, are we growing our bench, behind that person so we can succeed?
Great points. So I do have a question, and I'd invite anybody else who's watching, if you have a question for Greg, please put it in the chat. But you showed a slide that included declining enrollments, not only in sort of K through 12, but then also in higher ed and in at least some cases, but even small increases there. Are you seeing that safety is playing a part in the declining enrollments, or is it something else? Is the data telling you that, that people are just hunkering down in there, particularly for like kindergarten, because it's not required, right? So are parents opting to err on the side of safety until things blow over? Or tell me your insight there.
Sure. So I'll address the post-secondary side. So I feel like I have more data there. Certainly, we've heard a lot anecdotally on the K through 12 side, but we know on the post-secondary side, there's kind of a couple different forces at play. I think one, I heard this loud and clear when I worked at the technical college in Georgia this fall. What was virtual schooling for children was quite challenging. Maybe I went to Georgia Piedmont for my nursing classes pre-pandemic, but now I'm having to be at home and help take care of a child that would have been in school, and I would have been in school at the same time. So I think that's been a part of that, and that balancing act. Maybe we've also seen declining number of credit hours. So maybe I was taking full load, and now I'm just taking 3 or 6 that I may be able to manage online. Another cost, another challenge is financial. It's been a really weird recession I've talked about, but we have great financial aid in Georgia. We've got the Hope Scholarship and the Hope Career Grant, but cost of attending school, it can be challenging. Balancing a work schedule and a school schedule, it can be challenging. Some students learn better in person, and I think virtual education's been a struggle for some subset as well, whether I'm in post-secondary or in K through 12 as well. So kind of all those different things. And I think it's all just kind of combined. Certainly I suspect, and we saw this in the Census Bureau data, safety also plays into mind there as well. But like we've heard all morning, we've got a whole legion of educational leaders that are working really hard on that topic, and working with really smart people to keep everybody safe.
Absolutely. We do have a couple questions that are rolling in. So Megan asks, I'm curious if fully online class offerings have increased at USG enrollment among students who need that type of access, or are traditional residential students accounting for the enrollment increase?
So with the enrollment data that's released by both of our state higher educational systems, We don't get that kind of granularity of data. So I can't answer that with any certainty. We know that a lot of campuses are doing online courses more. We're also seeing a lot of kind of these hybrid models, these high flex models that are trying to get students into the classroom occasionally, because we know that for a lot of courses that face-to-face component is really important. And I think too, I heard all of our higher education leaders said, we're spending a lot of time planning for fall of 2021. That we don't know exactly what the world's going to look like, but we want to get more students on campus. We want to, as safely as we can, get back to more normal. So I think that's going to change.
Yeah. Wow. Vanessa asked another question. So going back to that decline in enrollment and noting that obviously kindergarten was one of the highest, but then followed by fifth grade. What are you seeing that's accounting for that decline in attendance in fifth grade?
Ooh, that's a good question, and I don't have an answer for that. And sometimes I get a little afraid sometimes of sharing data that I don't have the full answer for. So Vanessa, I wish I did. Some of that may just be cohort size. So as we've gone through, we kind of look at enrollment. Some years more kids are being born than others. So I haven't done the analysis to untangle how much of that is tied to fifth grade and how much of that is tied to just different size cohorts we might have going through our school system.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of comments that are coming in, and someone is saying our students that surveyed at Georgia Piedmont Tech echo everything that you've noted. Virtual classes are difficult, and face-to-face is crucial for some of the hands-on type of training learning. We heard that a little bit this morning. COVID safety concerns, homeschooling, lost income, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that we are hearing a lot about, and so I work at Goodwill. We do workforce development. We're hearing a lot about it and are seeing, and it's really unfortunate when we come to demographics of who's not in the workplace and who's not seeking jobs are women, and it's disproportionately. We've been hearing a lot about women who are no longer able to, because they're the primary caregivers in a lot of situations, are not going into the workforce. Is there data, or are there data sets that are showing that level for our state? And are there things that we as the business community can be doing to sort of foster bringing women back into the workplace?
Sure. Yes, and I'll tell you, the data validates exactly what you're saying. I think some of the challenge there is most of our labor market data is lagged by 6 to 9 months or more. So the kind of the data that I typically would rely on, we only have it going through June. So a lot of that data is really at the national level. We get national data sets much quicker than we do state or sub-state regions. But I have no reason to suspect that Georgia really looks any different than the nation as a whole. And in terms of solutions on that, I think certainly all the work that's being done to reopen schools and help get students there. And certainly all the work on the pandemic. And then I think as workforce development leaders, we're going to have to be looking at that. And this is kind of some of these things I've been talking about that, looking at it in 1 year and 2 years. That maybe right now there's not as much we can do. That I think talking about it and making sure that folks are aware of this. But then also what needs to happen. What kind of services does Goodwill or WorkSource? How can we help quickly reconnect folks and help them reconnect to where they were? And I think that's kind of the beauty of our workforce development networks, is that, we can, be thinking about that now, and maybe, in 6 months when things are, continue to improve, and really kind of have that programming ready to go, and really kind of have thought about that. So I think that's a hope coming out of today, is we've highlighted some of the issues we might need to be thinking about, come summer or fall, for us to be working on as a community.
I've got one more question. I want to sneak it in, and I know we're up against the end of our event, but Brenda asked, is there any data that addresses whether college graduates with 100% online degrees versus in-class course degrees have higher or lower success rates?
So Brenda, I don't have anything that I can definitively cite there for you. Happy to do some more thinking about that. But I'll tell you that a lot of it really depends on the institution as well. I think pre-COVID, and we've done a lot of shifting in COVID. Pre-COVID, there were institutions that really knew how to do online learning really well, and there are others that knew how to do resident instruction, on-campus instruction really well. So, you know, I'm not even sure if some of the data we'd have pre-COVID would even impact us now, because it's been amazing to see how higher ed is transformed, how, you know, our technical colleges, our university systems, our private colleges have really transformed in order to, you know, to keep students connected, but also to take the classroom virtual. So I know that our institutions are working really hard on this. Retention is really important to our institutions. Graduating students is really important. Is really, really important. So I'm not the right person to answer that definitively.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Greg, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for shedding that detail and that data. I've learned a lot just with looking at the slides, and I know it looks like our audience was very engaged in what you were presenting. Thank you so much for the websites that you were able to share too as well, so that we can go ahead and get some more of that data. For everyone, it has been a full day. I want to thank again all of you for attending. I want to thank our sponsors, Public Supermarkets for sure, Kaiser Permanente, Georgia United Credit Union, Farrell's Conclave, and of course the DeKalb Chamber Foundation. We've heard from our most important voices across the county in education and workforce development. We started off with our CEO, Michael Thurman, and then went into leaders from Georgia State University, from Emory University, from City Schools of Decatur, DeKalb County School District, and Georgia Piedmont Technical College, and of course Goodwill of North Georgia. And then, you know, we flipped over to our panel and we heard voices that we don't always hear in the conversation. We heard from our parents, we heard from our students, we heard from those who are working on the front lines of safety in our schools. We heard from our higher ed partners, and we also heard from those who are on the front lines of getting people back to work. And then we wrapped our conversation with a statewide perspective from Matt Jones, who really shared some insight as to what we're doing at the state level, and of course wrapped our conversation here with Greg today and giving us those trends across education and highlighting what we're seeing across Georgia. All of this is part of the ecosystem that we all work in and support at the chamber. We are here to support the business community. That's what we do, but we know the business community cannot thrive unless our community has strong education and workforce development. It all works together. So again, we hope you have enjoyed today's program. We are recording this. It's all recorded. We're going to make it available to all of you after. So if you were in one of the breakout sessions and you wanted to hear one of the others, please feel free to look at that and replay that at your convenience. We thank you so much for your day. Please continue to stay engaged with the DeKalb Chamber of Commerce. We hope to bring you more exciting programming like this. But most of all, stay safe and stay well. Thank you so much.